I have an interesting problem because, the human mind apparently processes numbers as 1, 2, 3 and many. So besides the host, Mr. Nakku, you already had 3 speakers. So I become part of many. So before we have a break, it already becomes too large a component to handle. So I thought I'll break my talk into a number of threes so that at least the processing capacity of the mind still absorbs a few more things before we have the break. So when we talk of value and then unlocking that, so value is always seen from a consumer's perspective, or as the case may be, the customers or user and so on. So if you see that for the grain and cereal industry, the primary consumer is in the shape of food. We of course also have the end consumers of the grain and cereal industry in the form of feed as well as fuel and so on. But for now, let's focus on food as to what is it that the consumer is seeking, and then we go on to how do we unlock that. And then I faced my second challenge there. When I looked at what are the values that the consumer is seeking, I ended up looking at 6 of them. So I said, let me break them into 3 plus 3 to make it easy. The most fundamental thing we all look for in food is taste. While many other things are talked about, but unless something is tasty, you won't consume. Very rarely you want to compromise on taste. So that is something that you would look as a value that the consumer is seeking. And then as you have more food and as people become more richer, one would look for more variety, saying that it's not just more of the same, however tasty it may be, but I would like to consume different things, and then therefore the value that is sought goes into more variety. And as one becomes either more busy in life or more lazy in life, you start looking for convenience, whether convenience at the time of buying or at the time of cooking or using at any part. So therefore the first set of 3 value elements that the consumer is seeking are taste, variety and convenience. And in the next slot, we heard quite a bit on the angle of safety. Obviously, when there is shortage, anything is good for consumption, but as food is available in plenty and as one can afford, then the things shift to how safe is what I am consuming, and increasingly that becomes a value that the consumer seeks. And today happens to be the celebration of Fitness Day. The Prime Minister is going to launch that as the National Fitness Day. And the whole aspect of health, wellness, all of this becomes another angle. That how will I control my diabetes, or how do I not become diabetic? How do I deal with my potential cardiovascular issue as the age grows, and all of those elements which are on the health aspects, and then similarly the basic nutrition and nourishment in terms of the wellness. So that becomes another. And lastly, another interesting element which also has been coming in these days is the aspect of responsibility. The consumers are also looking for the aspects of environmental responsibility, saying how is the natural resource getting consumed, how are we contributing or coping with climate change, our responsibility towards society, and how inclusive is what you're producing, what is the farmer's share of what a consumer is paying, how fair has your trade been, and so on. So that becomes another value for which consumer is willing, is for seeking and then willing to pay a premium or give a preference if 2 products have everything else being the same. How do I choose also things which are more responsive? So second set of 3 factors, therefore, are safety, wellness, and responsibility. If this is what a consumer is looking for, and these are things that some of them, of course, have been known for a very, very long time. Some of them evolved as the society evolved and awareness increased and the incomes increased. The question for this particular theme is, how do we unlock this? And when you look at a value from a consumer end, Unlocking happens through the entire alignment of the chain, right from consumer back to the farmer, as you call, from the plate to the plow. So let's look at simple ways as to how do we unlock. If this is what consumer is seeking, you grow what you want, is one way. And the second way is preserve what you grow. And third is modify the way you want to consume. So when you break down in terms of how do you unlock value, this is what it is at the core. So again, there are three ways in which you could look at unlock. So I'll just expand a few elements in each of these. What exactly do you really do when you say grow what you want? So one of that is what you grow. So if you look at what you grow, so obviously we need to grow more things. The variety that we talked about within grain and cereals, I think it has come some kind of a full circle. We had conventionally in India lots of millets and very nutritious cereals that we were growing. I think through the time in the colonial regime, we were also put through to export many other products. In the process, the value of some of these millets were brought down by the very way they were even named. If you look at any millet, either they were called coarse cereals, they are downgraded, or animal names have been attached to it, foxtail and what have you. So the idea is that how do you enhance aspiration to something which is more and more supposedly refined versus these other kind. So I think if one of the aspects in variety is that you also add a lot more to your cereal basket and to get the complete width of what a consumer would like, variety certainly becomes one in terms of what you need to grow. And obviously, all the attributes that consumer is seeking, whether it is on the health or wellness aspects, the nutrition aspects, or you have many elements, like if you have glycemic index as a concern, how do you get low glycemic index? If you have gluten as a concern, how do you get low gluten? Because there's so many segments of the consumers, each one looking for a very different aspect, and therefore, right from the stage of what you are growing, one needs to look at figuring out what is the way to unlock. How you grow, obviously we talked about the element of safety, which starts right at the farm in terms of what kind of crop protection chemicals have been used, what kind of nutrients have been used, and how is the soil, water, whatever way it is grown, how is that treated, and so on. So therefore, way in which you're growing becomes another way of unlocking and delivering the consumer attribute that we talked about. And where you stand is more about the responsibility in terms of natural resources. How sustainable is the way? Are you flooding your fields and consuming more water than you can afford to spend? Because as it is, we are 17% of world's people, but only 4% of world's freshwater resources. And the rapid pace at which we are consuming water, or even the topsoil, some of these become such perishable resources that we'll have serious trouble sooner than later. So therefore, how responsibly are you growing? Our social equity. There are consumers who are willing to look at brands which are saying it's been fair trade, or it is from a sustainability angle, let's say Rainforest Alliance. So many of kind of labels which are there. So there is willingness on part of consumers to look at the value that is being delivered through this kind of way in which it is grown and traded, and therefore all of this is the social and environmental responsibility that you stand for is what goes into this kind of a labeling. So grow what you want as the first of the three ways in which you can unlock These were the three ways: what you grow, how you grow, and where you stand. And I think the subsequent step is another way. I think first part of it, what you grow, also is a major challenge in India, because for large part between agribusiness or food processing or other supply chain based industry and the farmers, there's a disconnect by virtue of how our traditional marketing systems for agriculture were built, which were relevant at a point of time but not anymore. And therefore, if I say I need to engage with the farmer and enable the farmer to grow what I want, it's not an easy task. And therefore, a lot of value is getting locked in there. But even assuming some of that happens, the equally challenging part is in preserving what you grow. Now, preserving, whether it is the variety integrity, that a particular variety is grown and as cleanly without any admixture and refraction, is this what actually is getting through the supply chain and down to processing and to the end consumer, is an issue. Mr. Patnaik talked about all wheat becoming one dada, and therefore you miss out on a number of varieties that otherwise India was well known for. Therefore, the variety integrity. Or the other aspect that you also talked about is the traceability to the origin. So you may have a Sona Masuri rice all over many places, but you say, yeah, I want only Kurnool variety, then maybe there is a special attribute. Sharbati is grown in more than one place, can I get only Sihori Sharbati? And so on. So therefore, how do you ensure that origin traceability? So therefore, this whole aspect of the way the marketing systems are built is also what is locking away this value, which is simply in terms of how do you preserve identity and enable traceability of how it is grown and what is grown all the way into the consumption end, as another way in which one could look at unlocking. Lastly, the third point was in terms of modifying the way you want to consume. Now, grains used to be staple for 3 meals a day. It's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. But while continuing to hold their dominance in these 3 meals, now snacks are also becoming, the grains and cereals are also becoming ingredients in terms of anytime and anywhere snacking also these days. So therefore, enormous amount of opportunity there is there in many methods of processing that one could look at, whether it is simple flaking or puffing or baking or fermenting. There are a number of ways in which you add value there. Or you are milling or extracting and extruding, or blending and fortification also is something that we had talked about earlier on. So I think there are a number of ways in which the processing is the third stage in which how one adds value. And that is also somewhat remaining locked up, because the amount of, much like the amount of engagement and interface that happens at the farmer end for what you grow, similarly is also somewhat a disconnected chain at the consumption end in terms of how much is the engagement to really figure out what would be the ideal method to deal any of this processing, so that the task of a end user or an intermediate processor reaching their end user is also facilitated from all different angles. We just heard also from Mr. Raghavendra a number of problems that require solutions. So these are the kind of issues that one needs to look at in terms of how does every leg links to the next leg in terms of solving each other's problems as a method. So therefore, I think aligning the whole chain from understanding consumer at a plate, going back all the way to the plow and figuring out where is all it's locked, and then how do you figure out each step. All of these need not be done. Every player can look at different aspects that can be used to unlock and become more profitable. Thank you very much.